The question now is that this bill be read a second time, and I give the call to the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Public trust in government needs to be continually monitored, nurtured and maintained. The indignation with which some members opposite are approaching this debate seriously undermines the Parliament's ability to do just that. Not just the government, but the Parliament. Because when Australians look to us, they're looking at the Parliament, the representatives in this place representing them. And the debate that we've been hearing is seriously questioning their judgment and their capacity to be sound representatives of their constituents. Because the reality is we inherited an AAT that was unfinancial, beset by terrible delays and an extraordinary backlog and operating inefficient case management systems. So why on earth would we not want to fix that? Why would we not want to look at why it was the case and address it? So the bill before the House will remedy the situation, as well as address the fatal failure to adhere to a transparent and fair appointment process, which seems to be the area which has got those opposite especially rattled. But let's just talk for a moment just about some of the broader problems. The Refugee Council, in its submission to the Senate inquiry, outlined many of their concerns in relation to the AAT in 2021, including the skills and qualifications of the members, including a lack of legal qualifications, which I will be speaking to in more detail myself, the under-resourcing and the backlog of tens of thousands of cases, the politicisation of appointments and quantitative evidence of the appointments under different governments then making different decisions, and a high percentage of successful appeals in the federal court of AAT decisions. That organisation's evidence and that of many others has led us to this point today. And I just keep coming back to the question of how it is that those opposite could not want to support a remedy to the issues and the concerns that were raised by an organisation such as the Refugee Council. Because like many of the other improvements we're making to the systems that assure the public of the integrity of their federal government, this bill is clearly, demonstrably necessary. The Law Council commented on the AAT's appointment method under the former government. It used the word secretive, with the potential to undermine public confidence. It made the salient point that a lack of transparency impacts on the reputation of all members of the AAT, of which there are many. The Grattan Institute estimated that in the 12 years leading to 2015-16, only 4% of the AAT members had political affiliations, and then 29% in the 5 years following. This sudden and strange growth in the number of political appointments comprised up to 85 members of the AAT who were either simply members of the Liberal Party or close associates thereto. The member for Newcastle mentioned that the former Chief of Staff of Prime Minister Morrison was one of them, conveniently appointed just prior to the election in 2022. And we can remark on the level of cynicism that attaches to such appointments. What we must keep front of mind, however, is that the diminution of the public trust in the political system happens like this. Not all at once, but one shonky appointment, one underhand decision, one failure of process at a time. My colleague, the member for Robertson, used the right word to describe this process: erosion. As the member for Goldstein said, the last government lost power because they had lost the confidence of Australian people. This bill is aimed at fixing many ills, but this is the one that I think goes most directly to what the heart of what the AAT was designed to be. Members of the coalition know there were real issues of integrity in the former government. You know this. We are talking about the former Prime Minister for everything. Those opposite didn't even know what the former Prime Minister was doing half the time. Your own leader. We had to legislate to ensure that multiple secret ministries can't happen again, something that a normal, properly run government in this country couldn't even imagine happening. We had a convention. Who knew it had to be legislated because that convention would be abused by those opposite? Those opposite were asked to censure the member for Cook for his behaviour, but they squibbed it. They looked away. This is not a government that looks away. We saw problems, we heard the problems, we're working now to fix them. And those opposite would do well to put the past well and truly in the past and not let it live on by continuing to oppose something that is about restoring integrity and trust to our systems. And there was a time, long ago, when the Coalition were in fact in favour of a proper system of administrative review, one with integrity. The Labor-led AAT legislation in 1975 had its roots in recommendations of reviews carried out under Coalition administrations. When Attorney-General Kep Enderby, the member for Canberra, introduced the bill in March 1975, now 49 years ago, he stated that it was essential to the successful operation of the tribunal that it should enjoy a high standing in the community. This was not a controversial statement when he made it, and it should be something that we accept today. It is not possible, though, for the tribunal to enjoy that high standing if there is a perception or a reality that the tribunal is stacked. Kate Griffith of the Grattan Institute wrote recently, just a week ago in The Conversation, where she described the political stacking of the AAT is egregious. The Grattan Institute suggests that there are at least two reasons why political appointments can be deleterious to the system of review. Firstly, that a member may not have the skills or experience to be effective. And secondly, and importantly, that a member may not be willing to make decisions that will embarrass the government. Now, these are real risks, and I don't want to understate them. The Morrison government was the government of robo-debt, after all. And as the Attorney-General said, the decisions made by the AAT are important. They're always important to those people making applications to the body. And in some cases, as the member for Wentworth said, these decisions are life-changing and can be a matter of life and death. But let's suspend our disbelief for one moment and imagine the best of all possible worlds. Let's imagine a different world, one where the political appointments made by the former government through their insufficiently probative processes were all of them possessed of the skills and experiences to do the job and to do them well. So bear with me. And let's imagine that none of those political appointments were people who would be tempted to go easy on the government in a situation where the government might be embarrassed. It's a difficult one, but let's suspend belief. Let's try. It's an alternative reality. Well, but it's still not a fix, though, is it? Because not in any world in the multiverse. Why? Because my friend, the member for Moreton, suggested that it might just smell a little bit. In case you miss his playful understatement, it's because it stinks. Because whatever the reality in relation to an individual member or the whole taken together, the perception will remain that the body is created or infected with partisan judgments and therefore cannot act to provide impartial, non-partisan judgments. And members opposite can whinge all they want, but they created the problem, and they now stand here and either witness or be part of the solution. It's not harsh, even if it's extensive. It's simply appropriate. There's little way to imagine how this manifestly damaged system could be fixed other than with a bill like this. I'm sure that the Attorney-General would have preferred to move an amending act if he thought it would be sufficient. This is not where we find ourselves. The member for Menzies waved the Constitution at us this morning and pleaded for the importance of the separation of powers. Well, I certainly agree with the member. The member for Menzies needs, though, to take his copy of the Constitution instead of waving it at us. he should go and wave it at the member for Mitchell behind him, who came in here this afternoon and tried to pretend that appointments to the judicial body were all the same in character to appointments to diplomatic positions. I say pretend because, I mean, seriously, he can't really be that naive. The member for Mitchell might nevertheless still benefit from the separation of powers lecture that the member for Menzies is so keen to deliver. The separation of powers, though, requires continual maintenance. The Attorney-General Enderby, in his second reading speech in 1975, underlined the importance of giving the members of a tribunal a proper independence from the executive government. In the same debate, a young member for Bennelong, one John Howard, referred to the new despotism by Lord Hewitt, who urged an extremely careful and well-considered system where every decision was made with the knowledge that at any moment both it and the rest might have to be explained and defended in public before an impartial investigator. Independence, impartiality, not rocket science, but fundamental attributes of our tribunal that can attract public confidence and trust. This bill creates the environment within which these ideals will be preserved. It is aimed at fixing a number of ills by ensuring a merits-based selection, by putting the ART on a sustainable financial basis, by dealing with backlog and avoiding unconscionable delays. Delays, too, is injustice. By improving the case management systems. The Attorney-General has welcomed debate on this bill. Members and senators are on the record demonstrating strong interest in the questions before us. The member for Fowler rightly raised questions around balancing efficiency and fairness. And when we think about, if we just take one of the reviews undertaken by the Senate, they're not asking for huge radical reforms. They're simply asking for appropriate funding in order to allow the Administrative Review Council to be able to fulfil its statutory duties. It's simply recommending that there be clear selection criteria for appointments, that they're advertised broadly. And I note we've undertaken this advertising just recently and overwhelmed with applications in response. That was recommended that we simply establish and support an independent panel to properly consider each applicant's suitability for their role, the role and their qualifications, and recommend appointments against the selection criteria. Any other workplace, completely normal. Apparently something that cannot be supported by those opposite. They recommended that it limits the discretionary powers of the Attorney-General to make appointments that are not in accordance with the recommendations of the independent panel. So not too many captain's picks, not much to ask. They recommended that it impose a uniform approach to the duration of appointments and that it promote transparency and make public the outcome of each application and selection round. How can you possibly oppose that? And then they go further with their last recommendation, opposed by those opposite, that the committee recommends that the Attorney-General disassemble the current AAT and re-establish a new federal administrative review system this year in order to enable a seamless carryover of those cases currently being managed under the AAT, with the objectives of being accessible, proportionate, fair, economic, informal and quick, while promoting public trust and confidence in the decision-making of the review body. Sensible, proportionate recommendations to restore integrity for the Administrative Review Tribunal. Those opposite, Deputy Speaker, opposed these recommendations to the Attorney-General. So this government accepts the need for a robust review to be built into the legislation, and I commend the member for Griffith for his support for the bill, and I agree with him that we do need to seek to create a system that will last for decades. Ideally, we will act together to create a bill that will last even further into the future than the 1975 Act and underpin a system that will attract and maintain a high level of public confidence and support for the century ahead.